What's going on, everyone? So, Sidney Prescott, Nev Campbell, is on board, and this film is supposed to really heavily focus on Sidney for the lead once again, right? This story, direction, everything is kind of supposed to orbit around Sidney Prescott, and then Gale Weathers, Courtney Cox, we're still waiting, right? Courtney, she is not signed on yet. She's not officially on board. There have been all these rewrites. Supposedly, she kind of just wants to wait, make sure it's something she's interested in. There is a lot of expectation that she will return and that she will be a part of it. But this kind of goes into something that I've talked about heavily. And that is the need for other characters and to go a different direction. Now, if you've been subscribed to this channel for some time or you watch my videos for some time, you are aware I want to move off of Sidney and Gale. I love Sidney and Gale. I grew up with Sidney and Gale, right? In many ways, they have been the Scream franchise. But I also have a love for the franchise enough to where I want to see it beyond. And at some point, sooner or later, you're going to have to move off of these two. At some point, you are going to have to go a different direction if you want to continue to expand on these films. And the beauty of Scream is it's not just focused on one. Right? It's not a Jason or a Freddy or a Michael or something, right? It's not just a singular character that everything orbit around, right? Obviously, Sidney's kind of been that in many ways, but you even saw a story around Jill, and then you had Sam and Tara and the Core Four and all that stuff, right? Like, I understand with this film why you brought back Nev and Courtney, right? Or hopefully Courtney. It's because, you abruptly lost Jenna and Melissa, kind of in this position where it's like, well, we don't want to not make a film. What do we do? Okay, so you're going the safe route. I get it. I'm all for that. I'm on board for this film. But to me, I think you make this film Sidney and Gale focused, but you build other characters alongside these two, and that way you can start to transition into those characters. Right? Now, I'm not saying that you have to do that right away. Supposedly, they want to get into another trilogy. It's fine. You could even have Sidney and Gale in this trilogy throughout. But start to lay the foundation and groundwork for other characters beyond Sidney and Gale. Right? It's you look at the Core Four. And this is the key. It's about character development. Something Scream 5 and 6 has lacked desperately is character development. I mean, Scream 5 was so bad developing characters that, like, the consensus was that nobody liked your main character, which was Sam. Like, people were going after Melissa because they thought she was terrible. And it wasn't her. It was just the writing. It was just the direction in which they were trying to go with their character. And that further was proven by Scream 6, where everyone was kind of like, oh, she actually is pretty good. Right? And I defended Sam. I actually didn't mind Sam in Scream 5. I understood kind of what they were going for, but I also understand why people were kind of bothered by it. But nonetheless, right, like, even through Scream 6, who are these characters? You don't know these characters. Like, you don't really know them. Right? Like, Sam is having the hallucinations. She's kind of like on the verge at any point. But, like, who is she really? Like, what kind of makes her tick? Right? Like, Sidney. You knew who she was. She was that traumatized girl next door who just is very standoffish, just kind of dealing with this emotional stress of losing her mother last year, and she's trying to just kind of get by and skate by, and she's got this group of friends, and you have Matthew Lillard, who's clearly, kind of the class clown, but he's incredibly popular. He's a little obnoxious, but, like, people kind of love him. Bit of a womanizer. You get those little subtle clues. Randy, guy is in love with Sidney Prescott, low key. He's the kind of the video nerd, but he's still kind of popular and cool, kind of hangs out with this group. He's kind of almost his own guy, right? Like, you kind of go down the list, and you knew who these characters were. You knew who the cast was, right? Like, we got 2 movies with these characters, and it's like, okay, Chad was the jock. How do we know that? Oh, because he wore a jock's jacket, right? He wore a Letterman jacket. Oh, cool. Mindy, she's the know-it-all movie goer. Okay, like, okay, what else do we know about her? Right? Like, you didn't really get to know these characters. You didn't really get to flush out these characters. Right? Like Randy, you fell in love with Randy. Right? Like, people were devastated when they killed him. People were furious when they killed him. Tatum, people to this day want Tatum alive. People to this day have thrown out like, oh, you know what, like Tatum, maybe Rose had a twin or whatever. I mean, even Rose McGowan has thrown out that idea. Don't even get me started on Stu, right? People love Stu so much that there's an entire audience that are begging for him to return to the franchise. Who's begging to have any of these characters back? Right? Like, I'm not talking about the actress, right? Like, again, people love look at Jenna Ortega and her career. People love Jasmine Mason, all that. I'm talking about their character. Like, who is like, man, I really want to see Mindy back. Most people can't stand Mindy as a character. The consensus is she's a terrible character. She's obnoxious. She's this, she's that. Right? Mason, nobody seems to really care. Everyone's like, he should have died in Scream 6. I think, you know, like, the only one that people really want back is Jenna Ortega, and that's because it's Jenna Ortega. Like, they don't really care so much about Tara. It's just Jenna Ortega. Right? Like, and again, no one even liked Sam until Scream 6. Right? So again, like, who's begging to have these characters? More people want the original characters back than they want the core four in these last two films. So character development is key. Character development is important. But it's why. So because there's supposed to be so many rewrites, right? My hope is that they're changing it to develop more characters better. I'm hoping Kevin Williamson is kind of in there right now going like, hey, you know, we need to develop more than just Sidney and Gale. Plus, I don't have faith in the writers to build Sidney and Gale further. They did a terrible job with Sidney and Gale. Terrible. I mean, Scream 6, there was 0 point in Kirby or Gale being in that film. They literally did nothing. Name me one thing Kirby did that required it to be Kirby Reed that no other character could have just done. Like, that Kirby's character literally could have been anybody else. You could have been Kirby in that film. Right? Like, it was just always Hayden Panettiere. Right? Outside of that, there was no, like, her character served zero purpose. Same thing with Gale. Right? Like, Gale should have just died in that film. Right? Like, there's nothing, like, Gale served the only purpose she served was discovering the shrine room, but Dermot Mulroney's character, Detective Bailey, was like, oh, I was going to reveal it, but she beat me to it. Right? So, like, she served no purpose in that regard because the only thing that she did, the killer was going to reveal anyway. Was going to pretend like he stumbled across it. Like, so it wasn't something where she, like, foiled his plans or anything. Like, it just, and then Scream 5, again, Sidney served zero purpose. Right? Outside of, like, I'm bored and shooting through the doors, which that was cool. That was very Sidney-esque. But her putting the tracker on, she said Gale, she learned it from Gale. So Gale could have put the tracker on. And then everything heroic she did against the, you know, Amber and Richie, Mindy could have done. Because in hindsight, we knew Mindy was alive. Right? So, like, Mindy could have just played that role. And it would have made more sense and tied into the original when Randy was supposed to be the hero. So, even that would have been better and made more sense. Right? Like, again, we got to get back to growing characters. You know, think of Scream 96. Think of how good those characters are. Think of how much you felt you knew those characters. Right? Think of like the feelings you got with those characters. And then think back to, like, I mean, in the defense of 5 and 6, I guess, you can make an argument every film has gotten worse and worse with character development. Right? Like, Scream 2 was, like, okay, but kind of tapered off a little bit, especially with, like, Mickey. Like, Mickey had the potential to be the best Ghostface we've ever had, like, to this day. And they just kind of dropped the ball with that. You know, Scream 3 was a bit all over the place. Right? Scream 4, you know, kind of just were kind of running through people outside of, like, Jill and a little bit of Kirby. You didn't really get much from anyone else. You know, and then you get into 5 and 6, and it was just like, again, but you got, like, it can't just be Sydney forever, as much as people want it, right? Like, the thing about Scream is the realism. The thing about Scream is, that it at least feels real. Is it a movie? Does it have movie logic? Does it do silly things that are unrealistic? Sure. Right? Like, look at Chad, right? Like, that was incredibly unrealistic. But I digress, right? Like, I love Sydney. Again, I grew up with Sydney. She is the final girl. Right? Usually by now, the final girl has been killed in these franchises, right? But not Sydney. Sydney's still around, still alive, still there, right? Still fighting. But so many people want her to have a happy ending. How can she have a happy ending if she's in every film? Right? And then at what point does it start to become redundant? At what point does it start becoming too predictable? At what point does it kind of get like, all right, like, we've seen this before, right? Like, how many motives can you have around Sidney Prescott? How many family members or friends want Sydney dead? How many times can you continuously just beat up Sydney before just natural occurrence takes place, and she just dies through that? At what point does Ghostface just get lucky? At what point does Ghostface just get smart enough to go like, hey, let's just get like 10 of us together and just go kill her. I don't care how prepared she is. We're going to take her out, right? Like, especially if you don't know it's coming and it's a surprise. Like, at what point do you just like go around the wrong corner and meet your end? You got to build characters beyond Sydney. And I really hope that that's a point of emphasis and that's a point of the rewrites, right? Like, I really hope that they're like, hey, we need to flesh the characters. And look, again, like, you don't have to, I'm not saying don't ever have Sydney in these films. Right? You could have it be Sydney's daughter. I don't care. Right? But you need to start developing other characters that fans and audiences can buy into, that you can kind of continue to grow the future of this franchise with. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, and I pass a question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you agree with me? Do you agree with my points? Do you think, like, yes, we need to have other characters. You really need to build other characters. Do you hope that the rewrites are rewriting for newer characters, right? Really rewriting to establish new characters? Or do you think, like, no? Again, like, my concern is, like, what if Courtney doesn't come back? Right? Like, what if Courtney decides, like, you know what? Like, I ran my course. She's been in every Scream movie thus far. She wanted to die in Scream 4. She might be looking at it as like, look, I ran my course. Let me take this movie off. Maybe she comes back in a later movie, but maybe she just wants to take this off. Right? Just say my character's been recovering from her wounds. That would be believable. And then just kind of take time off. And then it's like, now what? You got to have other characters besides Sydney. And, they're supposed to do the family dynamic, but are they actually, based on the rumors going around? They're not. Based on the rumors, Mark Kincaid and her kids are hardly in this film. I'm hoping the rewrites are fixing that. But, again, however you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me not. It's me enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one.